So I clear up the run that I was on. And by the time I get down there, they have the trailers around it and all this stuff. So I get out of my car, I walk up to the door, and they had been down there for probably about an hour. I get out of my car and I just walk up to the door. I knock on the door. Natasha, open the damn door, girl. Officer McNeil, is that you? Yes, open the door. She opens the door. Everybody's looking at me like, you son of a. But because I took time to build that bond with her the week before, once she heard me, she knew, that she could get something done.
Welcome to 365 Brothers, the podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Robin Shine, and get ready for another episode where I introduce you to another amazing, interesting, intriguing, and inspiring African-American man from the United States. They come from a variety of professions, various parts of this nation, and all of them bring their wisdom. So, chill out, relax, and listen in. Make sure you follow us. We're on Instagram at 365 Brothers. Also, you can go to 365brothers.com/Linktree, LINKTREE, 365 Brothers /Linktree. You'll find links to all things 365 Brothers, as well as links to anything Robin Shine. Again, thank you, and let's listen in. Today we're speaking to a gentleman who is a retired officer after 20 years of service, and during that time received many commendations. And so, I can't wait to ask him about the law enforcement question, and I'm sure there's going to be other stuff that comes up in between. Also, an entrepreneur. He has a janitorial services businesses, which he started in 1995. And you know how it is with the brothers I interview. They are not satisfied just doing one thing. So after he retired, not only did he start the janitorial business, his entrepreneurial spirit was lit up and started doing some other businesses. He's also a very proud father, which is probably why he's also hosting a podcast called We Black Fathers. He's retired, but he is busy and going. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Anthony McNeil. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate the opportunity to be on this fantastic format that you have here.
Why, thank you. Before we go into my standard questions, Anthony, is there anything that you'd like to share with the listeners to help them get to know you better?
There is one thing that I want to share that only a handful of people know about me. And
okay.
And that is that I am a diehard NASCAR fan.
Okay.
I know that's unusual for us, but it's a sport that I've been involved in, or I shouldn't say involved in, but I've been into for, probably 30, 35 years. And I encourage other brothers and sisters to really look at the sport. There's a lot of Blacks in the sport that we don't know about. There are Black owners such as Michael Jordan, NBA former player Brad Daugherty, Pitbull, the rapper, owns a team. There are a number of Black engineers and mechanics that are on the teams. And the sport is not like it used to be back in the day. It's a corporate sport now. So it's different. And I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
So I could let you just skate over that, but let's just make it clear. So when you say now it's a corporate sport, and this is not your grandfather's NASCAR, the one where he didn't want to go sit in those stands with those people. Right. So tell us what break it down. What's different?
Well, everybody knows the history of NASCAR. It started out back from moonshining, and back in the 40s and 50s, and we all know what took place back then. And the sport had a reputation, or it has a reputation of being for predominantly white people from the South. Mm-hmm. And, and there's, like I said, there's not a lot of Blacks that are into NASCAR or racing, period. But if you go back and you look at the history, there's a gentleman by the name of Willie Scott, who was the first Black NASCAR driver. He actually won the first NASCAR race back in 1965, I think it was. I'm sorry, Wendell Scott. And he didn't get his trophy that day that he won because they didn't want a black man to win. Wendell passed away a few years ago, but his family finally got his trophy. I believe it was in 2019. And Wendell was just one of a handful of blacks that I've raced. We've had Willie T. Ribbs, and today we got, Bubba Wallace. So there's a number of blacks in the profession, and there's a young brother coming up that's in the profession. I can't remember his name, but he's like 19 or 20 years old. This dude is going to be the Tiger Woods of NASCAR. Trust me on that. Yes.
Okay. Well, see, now you make me want to, just because I'm so used to being at the, the last one getting on the ride. So I'm going to find out this brother's name. I'm going to look this brother up, and I'm not going to put it in the show notes, people, because y'all want to look it up. You look it up. Why? Because I want to be in the know first. I'm gonna get to know this brother. That way, when I'm like, yeah, I've been following his career for 15 years. Y'all just heard.
And you know what's interesting about this young man, though? This is how we got it. NASCAR has a diversity program where they're trying to bring in obviously more minorities into the sport. But this young man, there's a simulating racing game, you will, but it's not really a game. I actually have one. I mean, these things cost a lot of money. And during COVID, this is where a lot of the NASCAR drivers went to compete. And this young kid was actually racing against professional NASCAR drivers and beating them during this simulation. And that's how he was discovered. And now he's out driving the real cars.
Get out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's hard for me to say this right now because, one, this is public, and two, you're a former officer, but I have to tell you that sometimes I imagine myself when I'm on a 5 and it's 70 miles speed limit, I might go a little over that just so I can experience the boom. And I'm like, dang, if I could just get to the Autobahn in Germany, man, I would go,
there you go.
Wild.
Well, I can't even talk because I just got stopped the other day. So
we're just keeping it real here, people.
I can't even say nothing. So
right. Oh my gosh. Well, okay, but so I have to ask you, as a former cop, did you get the ticket?
No, I did not. Nope. I did not. My wife always teases me. She goes, one day you're going to forget that badge and you're going to end up getting that ticket.
Look, and what we both know is then you're going to go to court and you're going to be like, hi, yes, I'm a retired officer, Anthony McNeil here.
Exactly.
That's if you don't see the cop beforehand. Not like I know how traffic cop. Not like I've been to traffic court, y'all.
We talking from experience here.
Woo! Anyway, so back to this interview. So let's talk about you. What is your favorite song or movie, either now or all time?
Actually, I have two songs, if I can.
Yes.
And one is Marvin Gaye, Sexual Healing. I'm old school now. I'm gonna just be upfront. I'm old school in every sense of the word. So,
I'm with you.
And the other is a gentleman who I feel don't get enough credit, and that's Alexander O'Neal. And the song is "If You Were Here Tonight."
I don't think I know that.
Oh man.
Don't look like that. Y'all can't see him. He gave me that look like, oh, come on now.
Alexander O'Neal is one of my favorite artists of all time. He does not get enough credit. For those who don't know who he is, he was actually the original singer of the group The Time before Morris Day came.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And Prince kicked him out. And when Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis left, they started producing him, and he blew up from there.
Okay. Well, okay, name one other song, because maybe I know a different song.
He did a record with Sherelle called Saturday Love.
Oh, see, that's okay. See, now we good.
Yeah, Sunday,
okay.
Monday, Tuesday.
Saturday, love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I apologize for that
Um,
terrible singing there.
Look, you and me both. Anyway, yeah, no, I love the old school. That's great. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Um, let's talk about words. What is a favorite saying, quote, metaphor, or book?
One of my favorite sayings and something that I truly believe in is the saying that everything happens for a reason. And I add on to that, good, bad, or otherwise.
Okay.
When I've gone through bad situations that I could not understand why I was going through them, sometimes that reason didn't show itself right away, but it always does down the line. And if I can share a quick story with you.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be too short, but,
Okay.
but bear with me here. 2008, my wife and I and the kids, we were on vacation and we were packing up to come home. And I was loading up the car and I had made a couple of trips back and forth. By the time I was done, you would have thought I just ran a marathon because I was sweating so bad and I was out of breath. And my wife, who's a nurse, thought that I was having a heart attack. But I knew that wasn't the case. Honestly, I thought I had bronchitis, to be honest, you know?
Wow.
So we ended up flying home and I went to work the next night and I had this pain in my leg that was just unbearable. And I did not know what it was from. But being a man, I was stubborn and I didn't go to the doctor for a few days. Finally, when I made my doctor's appointment, I went in and my doctor looks at my leg and he says, looks like you have a surface blood clot, which was no big deal by itself. And I said, that's funny, doc, because my sister had a blood clot about 3-4 months ago. And he says, you know what, just to be safe, I'm going to send you down for an ultrasound. So I'm on the table, the technician's starting the ultrasound and we're just talking. I'm sharing about the trip and everything. And right in the middle of the examination, she says, uh-oh. And I'm like, uh-oh, what? Have you been short of breath? I said, yes. She says, sir, we have to get you to the ER right now. You have the largest blood clots I've ever seen. Turns out I had blood clots in both legs that went from my hips down into my knees. And a 5-inch piece had broke off and entered my lungs. And anybody that knows anything about blood clots entering your lung, most people don't make it. But I walked around for almost 4 or 5 days with this 5-inch blood clot in my lung. And to this day, my doctor still tease me and tell me that I have 9 lives because other than the grace of God, he can't explain why I'm still here. But here's the thing that goes back to that saying about everything happens for a reason. Yeah. Because of my illness, the last 5 years of my career, I was forced to leave the road because the doctor placed me on blood thinners for the rest of my life. And heaven forbid, if I would have got shot or stabbed or something, I would have bled out. So I had to go inside and work the front desk. And during that time, I hated that position. It changed me as a person. I started to dislike people. I became very mean, unhappy, you name it. And within my first week of being up there, something started to happen that took place almost on a weekly basis during those 5 years. Parents would bring their kids in and ask me to talk to them because the kids were being unruly, weren't behaving, misbehaving or whatever. And that would happen 2-3 times a week. I'm talking about kids as young as 5 years old. I think it was about my 4th year. It was a year before I retired. A lady comes in with her son, who was 12 years old, her mother, and I was having an awful day that day. I was not up for any nonsense. And she says to me, I'm leaving him here. You do with him what you want. He hits me. He hits my mom. He is not coming back to my house.
What? She literally just dropped him off at the police station.
Yeah. So I did something that day that I had never done with any of the other kids. I took that young man aside and I got right in his face and I said, hit me. He clenched his fist and he started to cry. And I said, what are you crying for? You was a man when you was punching on your mother and your grandmother. Now you got a man in your face. Go ahead, hit me. I'm going to give you one swing, then I'm going to wear your behind out. Needless to say, he didn't hit me. But we ended up talking for almost 40 minutes. And his situation was one that I unfortunately had heard many times before. There was no strong male figure in his life. He was starting to come of age and he was hanging with the wrong people. He had low self-esteem and acting out was his way of getting attention, which is what he was craving, but he was getting the wrong attention.
Yes.
And the last thing I said to that young man was, look, I don't know you. You don't know me. But if I get an inkling that you put your hands on another human being, I will personally track you down and beat your behind. And they left. The day that I retired, they were having a cake and coffee reception for me. And I get called up to the front lobby. And as I walk into the lobby, I see this young man and his mom standing there. And she says, Officer McNeil, do you remember us? And I said, yes, I do. How can I help you? And she said, sir, can I give you a hug? And I said, for what? She says, I just want to say thank you. Since that day you spoke to my son, he's been a different child. He stopped hitting me. He stopped hitting my mom. He's doing better in school. He's starting to listen more and help around the house. And when she said that, it was at that moment I realized that everything that I had gone through with my health was for that reason, so that I could be placed on that front desk the moment that lady came through that door with her son. Because had it been any other officer, he might not have been treated the same way. That is one of my favorite sayings, that everything happens for a reason. And I later caught up with the kid down the road. He was 12 at the time. He ended up getting into Michigan State University, and he's doing very, very good. So that's why I say everything happens for a reason.
And that's just the one that you share with us today. And I know it doesn't even come close to covering the difference that these conversations make in lives. And so, sometimes it might have been just someone coming up to the desk, and just the way that you were kind, just the way that you were helpful and not mean had, transformed their relationship to being in a police station, which could have altered their life, or just someone being there of any race and seeing you at the front desk, a Black man handling it unexpectedly, right? Not that we're so rare in policing, but sometimes it's that one that you interact with that makes the difference. I know we say, thank you for your service for veterans and often for officers as well. But this is the reason we say those kinds of things, because the difference that gets made over a career is tremendous. So thank you for being that difference in your service.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to know, and this is where I usually just ask folks a little bit about how they got into their profession. What would you rather share? How you got into law enforcement, or your being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, the funny thing is they all go together.
Of course they do. Okay, go ahead.
Because my whole life, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I was younger, I started a t-shirt business and all this stuff. And as I got older, I went away to college, and I played college football for a year, and I ended up tearing up my knee, and I didn't want to finish school. I wanted to start a business, but at the time I was 19, 20. I didn't have the resources I needed to do it. So I ended up going back home, and I was working at the restaurant that I worked in when I was in high school. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I ended up staying there for about another 4 or 5 years. And one day during the lunch and dinner break, the new chief of police, who was the first Black chief of police at my department, was making his rounds, introducing themselves to the business owners. Well, when he came into the restaurant that I was working in, I just happened to be standing up front. And this is another one of them stories. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
And while he's waiting on the owner to come up, he looks at me and he says, have you ever thought about being the police? And when he said that, in my head, I'm thinking, excuse my language, but hell no.
Look, I already know somebody asked most of my students, hell no.
But at the same time, I was thinking, you know what? That's how I can get the money I need to start my business.
Boom.
And he ended up telling me about the cadet program. I ended up testing, and there was about 300-400 people that test, and I ended up finishing number 3 on the list. And I ended up getting hired with Southfield Police Department. And like I said, I ended up doing my 20 years. I actually left the department, though, in 95. That's when I left to start my janitorial franchise. And because I had saved up the money, and I was gone from the department for about 14, 15 months. The business was up and running. And I get a call from the chief one day, and he says, hey, you want to come back to work? And for self-employed, healthcare is expensive. So, so I was like, absolutely. So I was able to go back to work and continue the business. We still have the business going today. I mean, we're now the number 3 franchisee in the state of Michigan. And so everything worked out.
when you say number three franchisee in that industry or overall, like,
Yeah, I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I believe
okay,
that if someone's already done something successfully and I'm trying to do that, why not just do what they did? Instead of going out and starting a janitorial business from the ground, I purchased a franchise because it was already a proven record there of success. It's been now 27, 28 years, whatever it is. And we are now the number 3 franchisee and with that company in the state of
okay,
Michigan out
okay,
of roughly 800 franchisees.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. You
Thank
see,
you.
when you walk down the street, I know people don't immediately go former police officer, right?
Right.
And they're certainly not thinking a top business owner,
Yeah.
right? And yet, this is who we're passing on the street and judging and assessing.
Yeah.
And so,
It's funny.
go
I'm
ahead.
not to cut you off. I'm sorry, but you just
No.
reminded me of a story. When we first started, it was my wife and I doing
Hmm.
the janitorial work. And I remember we would go into these office buildings and no one knew we were the owners except maybe our contact people. People would look down on you because you're the cleaning people and treat you a certain way. And the
Hmm.
minute they found out that we were the owners,
Hmm.
whole attitude changed. You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. Trust me, I know. So you very accomplished. I asked this question in two parts. I want to know two things. One, of your accomplishment, which one is the one that means the most to you now? And then secondly, which is the one that when others hear it, it's the one that is most likely to get the or wow. So first one, which one is the one that means the most to you? Em?
It's a personal thing, and that's the
Okay.
raising of our daughters.
Mm,
We've made a lot of sacrifices over the years to get our kids to where they're at. And both of them are grown now. They're 23 and 27. And we are happy to announce that we're going to be grandparents soon for the first time, but
congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. We made a lot of sacrifices for our girls to get the education that they got. My oldest daughter is an attorney. Both her and her husband are attorneys. My youngest daughter works for the government in DC. And, we made a lot of sacrifices during our time of raising them. I think that's probably one of my proudest accomplishments, knowing that, when that day comes when my wife and I are no longer here, that they can be self-functioning, productive citizens of society and stand on their own feet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I can hear the significance of the sacrifice. Could you just share what's one of the sacrifices?
Yeah. Taking them to the school, putting them into the school that we put them in. We moved out into a predominantly white area. And when my oldest daughter went to high school, she was only one of a handful of blacks in the school. And both of my girls, made the honor roll. They stood out. My youngest daughter actually graduated high school a year early. And it was just little things like that we did, made sure that if they forgot their books at school, my wife would jump in the car and take them back. We didn't always like it, but,
Mm-hmm.
we did what we had to do to get them to where they're at. And just letting them see the work ethics that we have. When they were younger, they would go to the buildings with us and see us working and things like that. And, we just try to expose them to a lot of things over time, especially traveling, because we wanted them to know that the world is bigger than just this little town that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
And, now they both love to travel. My youngest just booked her trip she's going to France here in October. She's
Mm-hmm.
gone by a trip by herself. She's going just to explore and have fun. And it was just a lot of little things over time. My wife worked 12-hour shifts and I was working 10-hour shifts. So the weekends, she was never home when she was working in a hospital because she was working, but I was home and
Okay.
we would flip, when we had to. So we gave up a lot of our time together during the week so that we could be there with them.
And I hear the commitment that you and your wife were during your children's youth, that your primary commitment was raising your daughters,
Mm-hmm.
and that the rest of life revolved around making sure that that happened in a
Yeah.
way that would fulfill on your mission. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
lovely.
And to
And
answer the second part of that
yeah,
question, it would again be our children, because we have so many friends that we know who are struggling to get their kids to that point where they're self-sufficient. And so they always ask, how did you guys do it? And we were just strict with the kids, to not strict in the point that we punished them or anything like that. But my wife knew that when you got home from school, you did your homework. Nothing else got done until you did your homework. If you need help with it, let us know, and just little things like that, and we always told them, you're going to college, you're going to do this. It wasn't an option. It was just that simple. It wasn't an option, Now, what you do after that, that's up to you. But we're going to do our part to get you to where you need to be. A lot of friends of ours, I think they look at that and they say, you guys have done a great job, and they try to model what we've done.
That's great.
Thank you.
Kudos. Not everyone, it doesn't always work out.
It doesn't.
It does. And admittedly, there are some parents, they'll do everything they're supposed to do and it still don't work out. And you've touched on a couple already, but I'm still going to ask.
Okay.
Is there an additional significant moment, conversation, or event that changed the trajectory of your life that you'd like to share?
Probably a person more so than an event. And that would be my wife. And I say that because I was awful with handling money. It caused me a lot of headache and trouble, over the years. And my wife is totally opposite. She has a budget. She has everything figured out. She keeps track of everything to the T. And, before we met, I was bouncing checks and overdrafts and all, the story, and she said, no, you can't keep doing that. You can't keep doing that. So her doing that allowed me to get on track with my credit and things like that. And, and I still stumbled throughout the years, but I've gotten a lot better thanks to her with it. Because growing up, my parents' finances was something that was not discussed. We were not taught how to handle and deal with money. And my parents weren't good at it.
Yeah.
And it carried on to us, and I think meeting my wife, that was a vital part of me that I had to change. And I think had I not met her, I don't think I ever would have changed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
You're a former officer, right?
Yeah.
And so whenever I interview a law enforcement person, and by the way, I'm just going to take a moment and let my listeners know that in March of 2021, which would have been season 2, I interviewed 4 officers. So for the month of March, I interviewed 4 different folks who were actually still active in policing. And so if you have a special interest in hearing from Black men who work in law enforcement, then I encourage you to go check out those episodes. Just scroll through and get down to March of 2021, and you'll find those. And so one of the things I want to do with you, Anthony, is ask you to share an interaction either that you had with law enforcement as a civilian, so to speak, or a significant moment from your career in law enforcement that stands out.
There's so many stories I can tell from the job, but I had an incident, before I became a cop where I had an interaction, and it wasn't a bad interaction actually, but I think I was around 21 years old. And me and 3 other buddies, we were at a bar, and it was out in a predominantly white area. And a fight broke out in the bar while we were there. And one of my buddies ended up getting involved in it somehow. We didn't even know what was going on. And as we're leaving, the police are outside. So they stop us and put us on the car and start patting us down and telling us, what's going on. And like, man, we don't even know what you're talking about. We didn't have anything to do with this. It turns out, like I said, one of our buddies who was involved, we didn't even know he was involved because he had separated from us. Luckily there was some other folks that was inside who came over and told us, hey, these guys had nothing to do with it. That was the only interaction other than getting stopped for, speeding or something. That was the only interaction I ever had outside of while I was in the profession. But just real quick, just one other story I can tell. And this actually happened on I think it was the last week I was working. And it was a prominent pastor in our city who was a big time activist. And he and I really didn't care for each other because we had a run in on a boycotting situation that he was taking part in. And when I was on the front desk, his son, who was bipolar, ended up getting arrested. And I was a hostage negotiator for the department. And it was like I said, it was my last week. And his son, when he got arrested, his son was a very large man. He was probably 6'4", about 270, 280. And when they took him upstairs to the jail, he was causing all kind of problems. So they had to take him back to isolation and put him in a cell by himself. And once he got back there, he started flooding the toilets and all of this other stuff. So they needed to extract him out of the cell. And being a hostage negotiator, my lieutenant asked me if I would go up and talk to him. So I get up, and as I get off the elevator, there was a young white guy that was going to be taking my spot as negotiator once I retired. And he's standing there with a taser and black gloves on. And I looked at him. I go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm going to talk to this guy." And I looked at him. And I said, "Everything about you right now says I'm coming to do everything except for talk."
Yeah.
And and he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You are a negotiator. Your weapon is your mouth. The minute that gentleman sees that taser and those gloves, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to become more agitated than he is." And finally, we went back and we talked to this guy. And it's the typical thing in law enforcement and in life, period, sometimes, where if we just stop and take time to listen to people, you'll be amazed how far you can get with them. And this gentleman was causing all of those problems simply because when he got arrested, he had not fed his dog and he wanted someone to go feed his dog for him.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And I once we started talking, he told me that. I sent the car over, they fed his dog, and we had no more problems with him the rest of the night. And when his dad came in the next day, I was working, his dad came in to bond him out. And he says, "I heard what you did for my son." And say, "I would have done it for anybody. I just took time to listen to him." I said, a lot of times in law enforcement, we beat our chests and, we think, "Okay, I'm the officer here. You listen to what I say." And it's just a matter of just talking to people and just treating people with respect. And, I say that, and it goes on outside of law enforcement, just in life, period. Just sometimes step back and just listen to people. That's all it requires sometimes. You can save yourself a lot of heartache and headache just by listening.
Amen. That's all I got is amen. It's so beautiful to be in the, last 6 years of a career as an educator.
Mm-hmm.
Listening is the difference.
Yes. Between
ease and work.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said.
Well,
I can give you another story. There was
Please,
a young lady that lived in a trailer park in our city, and she had a 4-year-old child, and I had a run-in with her, and she was struggling as a single mother and having all kind of financial problems. And the next week I was working and I was on another run, and a run comes out that I wasn't involved in about a barricaded subject. A female was on the phone saying that she was going to hurt herself and her baby or her child, and she had barricaded herself in her trailer. And then when I heard her name, right away, I knew who it was. So I clear up the run that I was on. And by the time I get down there, they have the trailers around it and all this stuff. So I get out of my car, I walk up to the door, and they had been down there for probably about an hour. Cause like I say, I was tied up on my other run. And when I get down there, I get out of my car and I just walk up to the door. I knock on the door. "Natasha, open the damn door, girl." "Officer McNeil, is that you?" "Yes, open the door." She opens the door. Everybody's looking at me like, "You son of a..." But because I took time to build that bond with her the week before.
Yes.
It wasn't a problem. Once she heard me, she knew, that she could get something done.
You know what? Oh my gosh. How often, I can just go on like, I think, and I invite the listener to just take a moment, even if you put on pause for half a second. When was a time for you that when you took the time to listen, it changed the outcome of something that could have gone horribly wrong? But because you took the time to listen, it turned out in ways you couldn't even have fathomed.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. Sometimes people just need to get stuff off their chest.
Mm-hmm. And be heard, not just
Yes.
wait until you speak, but heard.
Right. Absolutely. And that is the key.
Right. Speaking of heard, imagine that the United States is a woman and she can hear you.
Okay.
If the United States was a woman, whether she's a mother, lover, stranger, neighbor, friend, you call it, what would you say to her?
Like I said, my wife and I have been married for 30 years, and it hasn't always been easy. Like anyone that's been together that long is not going, you're not, every day isn't roses. But when we went through our hard times, I would say to the United States that I would often say to my wife when we were having those moments, honey, listen, we've been here before. It's been tough, but we've made it through it. We have to stick together though. And we have to get through this together, because if we don't, it's not going to be a good outcome. As long as we're together and we stand side by side, we shouldn't have an issue. It's not going to be easy, but we will get through it. And you just need to trust me on that. And I think the United States is the same way. I think right now we're so divided on everything, but I think we've been here before, and I think we'll get through it. It's just like everything else that you're going through. You just have to let it run its course. And I think that's where we're at right now with the United States. It has to run its course. But I think we'll be all right. We'll be all right.
And you're right. There have been many times in the past where we've been divided.
Mm-hmm.
This particular division seems distinct, and there are always some unique aspects to each period of division.
Absolutely.
But it is, like you said, it's a period of division. So
yeah. And there's reasons for that, but that's a whole nother conversation.
That is look, I could have a whole different podcast just on that. And some days I feel like making one. So speaking of women, beyond the generalizations and beyond the stereotypes, what is something that you wish more women knew about the Black male experience in the United States?
I would say that despite our exterior, our strong exterior, we're fragile inside. And a lot of times when we become broken, it's because of y'all. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'll give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Please.
Have you ever seen the show Love and Marriage on Oprah's network? Love and Marriage, Huntsville, to be more specific. My wife and I like to watch these mindless, thoughtless shows sometimes.
I understand.
And we actually just had this conversation last night. During the season that we're watching, the episode that we're watching, there's a couple on there. They were a Black power couple from Huntsville, Alabama, Martell and Melanie. Okay. Built up this huge empire in the construction business and doing some other things. Well, before the show aired, I think it was in 2017 or 18, when they first came up with this idea for the show, Martell was cheating. And Melanie stayed with him, hoping that, it was a one-time thing. Time went on, he continued to cheat and so on and so forth. They finally end up getting divorced. And it's become really nasty between the two of them. But my wife brought this up to me last night. She goes, I was thinking, and you can see that Martell is still in love with this woman. Mm-hmm. But because he's so arrogant, immature, and a few other things, his hurt comes across in an ugly way. And once we started watching it turns out that Melanie was the one that held the builder's license. She was the one with the good credit. She was the one who was kind of the face of their celebrity and everything. And because of his immaturity and his lack of self-confidence, or I should say his overconfidence and his arrogance, I think that hurt him as a man to know that even though he messed up, and he says this during the show, that you drove me to this other woman. And I think it was because he felt less than a man a little bit. And he was broken inside because she had the good credit. She held the builder's contract or the license. Without all of that, they wouldn't have what they have. He was the muscle, but she was the brain, if you want to say. And I think that made him feel some kind of way. So he went out and he cheated with this woman. And he even calls the woman on the show a peasant. He had a child with this woman. He calls her a peasant, but that goes back to what my wife was saying. I think he wanted someone that would put him on a pedestal to make him feel good. So he found someone who was far beneath his wife that would do that for him. And that's what I say when I say that we're fragile inside, because we want to be that provider. We want to be the one that protects you. We want to be the strong one. But nowadays, and I have a lot of relatives that are like this, y'all want to be the boss. And that's fine. And that's fine, but you got to understand.
That's not a laughter of knowing.
Yeah. and there's nothing wrong with that. But understand that some men have that complex about them. And if it can lead to other things if it gets broken. Does that make sense?
I want you to know, I kind of want to roll my eyes, and I'll tell you why. So just so you know, when you first started, I was kind of like, I know you're not going to say because she has stuff, he cheated. And then I caught myself. It's like, Robin, remember listening? And it's like, okay, so let me listen.
But if you watch the show,
keeping it real, right?
Yeah. No, if you watch the show, you can see that's what happened.
I believe you. But my not wanting to listen was, you mean just because? But here's what I also know, because what I'm also playing back are the conversations we women have about y'all.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, I ain't trying to put no friends on blast, but here's what I'm gonna say. So how you said it right now, that men are fragile. We will talk about it and we will say it, but we'll say it like this. Men are so fragile. But I will honestly say, in our maturity, and with my over 50 friends, we have learned. And it's a shame that we don't convey this to more younger women. We have learned how important it is that men see themselves, but more importantly, know that they are seen by us.
Others, yes.
Seen by us as powerful. Mm-hmm. And by the time you hit 50, you do know. Well, if you talk to people, I mean, if you're reflective, you know what I'm saying? If you're interested in not just reliving the same old BS you've been living your whole life, you do get to a point where you realize, it matters to my king that he know I see him as a king. And it doesn't mean that everything he does is perfect.
Right.
It does not mean that you can't speak up. It don't mean any of that. It just means that it does matter. And I love that I'm asking this new question this season, because this season is the first season I'm asking that question.
Okay.
And I love gendered questions because it's a lot easier sometimes to talk about one specific group, so I can say, what do you wish women knew about Black men? But here's the reality. As women, we want to be seen as a queen, right? And we know this. But we don't then go, wait, so other people too? Yes, other people too. Yes. I want you to worship and adore and love me. Wait. A man wants to be adored?
Yeah. And it sounds crazy, but in that same show, there's another couple. He's very traditional. He's also very successful. But he wants his wife to stay home, take care of the kids. And he's like, I got you. You just make sure those kids get what they need, and I will take care of everything else. But she wants to go out and she wants to be like Melanie. She wants to build her own brand and build. And he's like, no, you don't need to do that, and it's causing a conflict between them. So and I get it. She wants her independence and she wants to go out and do things. I get that. You want some form of identity. I totally get that.
And that's the thing on both sides. And that is what is, I hope, the next evolution of humanity is, what about when we get to that place where we can step not outside of what it is to be woman or man or anything like that, but acknowledge that in each of us, we want to be powerful and we want to be loved. And maybe we don't have to choose.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Oh, anyway, thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk about power. What is a moment in your life that for you exemplified an experience of being powerful?
Oh, this is short and sweet.
Please.
It would be the first time I put some handcuffs on somebody.
Talk to me.
I realized at that moment that I had the power to take someone's freedom away, at least temporarily. And that's a powerful thing. And, it was one that I did not abuse. I didn't want to see it abused. And one that I really tried to avoid having to do if it was not necessary. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's necessary. But when you really think about that, you have the power to detain someone's freedom for a block of time, and that's a powerful thing. I mean, yeah, there's rules and laws and stuff, but still at the end of the day, you're taking somebody's freedom away from them. They had a part in that, of course, but that decision came down to, what you had to do. And I remember the first person I ever arrested and putting those cuffs on him for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Because, you got to understand, law enforcement for me was all new. I didn't know anybody that was in law enforcement. I didn't know anything about, other than going through the academy. And that was literally my second day on the job. Wow. And I remember he was a huge gentleman, and he had like 40 suspensions on his driver's license. Whoa. And that's why he ended up going to jail. But Whoa. like I said, that was a powerful moment for me to realize that, this guy was one moment on his way to work, and the next moment he's sitting in a cell. Yes, it's because of his actions.
Right.
But for me to intervene in that routine, that's powerful.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Like, you literally have the power to alter the course of someone's life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect way to explain it. There was a saying in law enforcement: I could hurt you worse with this pen than I can with this gun. One of the things with my department, we are one of the best trained departments around. That was one of the things our chief did not lack. He made sure we got every bit of training that we needed. And yes, a lot of officers realize the power that we have. Now, that doesn't say that there aren't bad officers out there. There are. There are some. George, the and I don't want to say his name, but the gentleman that killed George Floyd had no business being the police. I was a field training officer, and I trained new recruits. And if I felt you didn't make it, you weren't making it. Because I understand the power that we have.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give that power to just anyone. I encourage everyone, and it's probably a little more difficult now with with COVID and everything, but I encourage everyone, if you can, to go to your local police department and see if they do ride-alongs. It will totally change the way you view law enforcement. And if I can just share one more story real quick.
Yeah.
One night before I started work, we had an armed robbery at a movie theater. I start my shift, and me and two other officers, we was hungry. So we go to this restaurant to sit down to grab something to eat before it got busy. As we're sitting there, the restaurant is packed. There's three young Black gentlemen. I think they were probably in their early 20s. As they're walking through, we all see them, and we're looking at each other like, I know they didn't just walk through the door. We get on the radio. We ask for a description of the suspects from the armed robbery. Matches them to a T. So we get up. We ask the gentlemen to stand up. And of course, nobody knows what's going on. So all we hear is, why y'all harassing them? Y'all just doing that because they Black. No, it's not why we're doing it. And turns out it was them. They still had the stolen property and the gun in the car out in the parking lot. But I say that to say that, you know, things aren't always what they seem. Cops aren't just harassing people. We have a job to do, and we're trying to do it. Unfortunately, it caused a lot of bad things because you're dealing with a lot of people at the worst times of their lives, unfortunately.
I'm gonna leave as many of these stories in as I can because we don't get an opportunity to hear from the other side, you know, as often.
And again, I'll say it again. If you can, go do a ride along with your local police department. It will totally change the way you look at how law enforcement works.
I'll be honest with you. Anytime someone has said that, kind of like when somebody says, have you ever thought about being an officer? And kids are like, no. We say, oh, you should do a ride along. In my mind, I'm like, no. But you know what? I actually, I think I might take that on over the next year. So
yeah, it will totally change your perspective.
Okay. So nearly last question here.
Okay.
If you had this opportunity where you could spend 5 hours and you could spend this with any Black man, living or passed on, who would you choose and what would you do or what would you talk about?
If I had to pick one person, you know who it would honestly be? Who? Bill Cosby. And I would like to know why. What were you thinking? I like watching documentaries about mass murderers and things like that because I love to know why you did what you did. Yes, you're probably crazy, but behind that crazy, there's a reason. What drove you crazy? What drove you to do the things that you did? That's why I love being a hostage negotiator. And I was a detective for 4 years. I love interviewing people and figuring out, why did you do what you did?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, yes, thank you.
I know that's probably not a typical answer that your guest gives, but
no. But I get it as an officer. Maybe it's influenced by being an officer as a former detective or whatever, but I do get being curious, especially given the fact that I'm sure enough was thrown at him for free without drugs.
Yeah. And knowing that, even though you know you can get it for free, why are you still making that decision to do this? What caused that? You know, because there has to be a reason. You know, there's a reason why you chose to do that particular thing.
You know what I think?
What's that?
Nobody asked me, but you know what I think?
What's that?
I actually think that this was something that he saw other people doing.
Okay.
And getting away with. And he thought, oh, so that's the thing. Oh, now that I'm rich and famous, I can do this perversion too.
Yeah.
And
that's a good possibility.
No, honey, you can, but you're going to go to jail. I think now we know, you know, they're just things that are a little different. And I don't think that's something where you just one day come up with, oh, I'm going to get access to these drugs and do this. That's something you saw. Somebody exposed you to that.
Absolutely.
And then you saw them get away with it. And then you thought, oh, so this is another expression of being powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then, you know, but anyway, that's my speculation. Anywho, but what did you get, Anthony, from having this conversation today for yourself?
Another connection that I think I could benefit and transfer benefits too. And that's the connection with you. I think that's why I love doing this. The people that I've met doing this, the connections that I've made, I think has been priceless for me.
Yeah.
Great opportunity, because I've started listening to your podcast and listening to some of the stories that you share, with some of your prior guests. And it's just weaving that web of just all these different connections from all these different backgrounds and different places. And, if we can all come together and try to help each other and do things like that, I think it's a good thing.
Fantastic. Well, same here. It's mutual. And, well, I'm always left with a particular view, kind of like I think of it as everybody stands on some particular corner in this vast universe that is kind of where they stand in their gift, who they are. And for me, yours is service and contribution. And I know that sounds a little cliche. I get that. But when I hear all the stories about what you did, whether it's the hostage negotiation, go ahead, open up the door. It's happening. Open up the door. It's Officer McNeil. Or what you did with that young man. It's very clear that you exemplify what it is to be of service as an officer and then as a human being. We didn't even touch on your entrepreneurship or your podcast, but I also know that service and contribution is important because one of your podcasts is We Black Fathers, just one of them, right? But anyone who takes that on, it's just you exemplify service. And I thank you for being that example in the world. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Before we go, I will include in the show notes links to your podcast and some other ways to get in touch with you. I'm not somebody who can just hear it and then I got it. I got to go to a show note. But for people who can hear it and then they got it, any couple places you want to direct them to, Anthony?
Yeah, if you just go to weblackfathers.com and you can reach me on all my socials, listen to the podcast, do everything there. You can also access the community that I've put together for Black Fathers. The We Black Fathers Foundation is coming. We've filed the paperwork, so look for that. It's going to be a nonprofit organization where we're going to help Black fathers with whether it's legal, education, whatever they need. We're going to try to help in any way we can with that. But weblackfathers.com, and you can get me on everything from there.
Excellent. Y'all see what I'm talking about? You're like, next we're going to do a foundation. We provide whatever you need, education. And I'm like, see, that's why I just said what I said. It has been a privilege. Thank you so much for making the time. Yeah, just thank you.
Likewise. And thank you. Stay blessed and continue doing what you're doing because you have a great platform here and the stories are fantastic.
Thank you for listening to 365 Brothers. I certainly hope you enjoyed the episode. I encourage you to subscribe. Please leave a review. I want to know what you think. Also, if you know someone who would be a fantastic guest for 365 Brothers, please direct them to our website, 365brothers.com. You'll also find all the episodes there, 365brothers.com. And your support is welcome. And remember, to listen is to love.